Richmond, Virginia, August 1855. During the stifling heat of a Tuesday afternoon at the slave auction platform in Lumpkin's Alley, an event unfolded that would shatter the carefully preserved order of Virginia's most influential families. A bondsman was brought to the platform, a young man whose presence so completely violated every expectation about human servitude that bidding didn't merely exceed predictions. It ceased entirely for 17 complete minutes while grown men remained frozen, unable to speak, unable to comprehend what they were seeing. The price that eventually broke the stillness would reach $11,000, exceeding the value of the entire auction facility, surpassing what some estates sold for. The purchaser, a man called Harrison Whitmore, would be deceased within 3 weeks. His spouse would disappear before his remains grew cold, and the striking bondsman who triggered this disaster would initiate a chain of occurrences so troubling that Richmond's publications would later collaborate to eliminate entire dates from their records, creating voids in history that stay unexplained to this moment. What was it regarding this specific bondsman that drove logical men to insanity? What mysteries surrounded his appearance in Richmond that influential establishments spent generations attempting to conceal? The reality starts not at the auction platform, but 6 weeks prior in the highlands of Western Virginia, where an incident occurred that nobody could clarify. The community of Lexington rests in the Shenandoah Valley, a location where established Virginia wealth goes to imagine the contemporary world doesn't exist. During July 1855, a roving slave merchant called Gideon Hale reached there with a group of 12 bondsmen he'd acquired from struggling farms in Kentucky. Hale was recognized for his harshness, even among individuals who earned their living through human misery. He operated solo, relied on no associates, and maintained a standing for obtaining bondsmen through approaches that other merchants deemed too risky or too corrupt, even by their lowered principles. Hale registered at a lodging house at the town's edge, secured his bondsmen in the barn, and continued to drink himself senseless at the neighborhood tavern. This was his routine: purchase cheap in Kentucky, sell expensive in Richmond, drink away the shame between transactions. However, that evening something shifted. A female appeared at the tavern. Nobody could afterward agree on her appearance. Some recalled her as aged, others as middle-aged. Some stated she dressed in black silk, others insisted on plain homespun. But all recalled her eyes, gray eyes that appeared to perceive through skin to the decay underneath. She positioned herself opposite Gideon Hale and addressed him for under 5 minutes. Nobody overheard what was spoken, but when she departed, Hale remained motionless for almost an hour, perspiration streaming down his face despite the cool evening, his hands trembling so severely he couldn't raise his glass. He stumbled to his lodging house past midnight. The following morning, the barn where he'd secured his group stood vacant. All 12 bondsmen had disappeared. Their restraints remained on the floor, still fastened, no indication of forced access, no proof of how they'd fled, and Gideon Hale was discovered in his chamber, aware but unresponsive, his eyes wide, yet perceiving nothing, saliva flowing down his jaw. The community physician inspected him and pronounced him the casualty of some type of seizure. His intellect was destroyed. Whatever had occurred to him had eliminated his capacity to talk, to think, to operate as anything beyond a breathing form. He was transported to an institution in Staunton, where he would spend the final 4 years of his existence seated in a chair, gazing at nothing, sometimes whimpering like a wounded animal. The fled bondsmen were never located. The puzzle of how they'd released themselves from fastened restraints in a protected barn stayed unresolved, and most residents in Lexington were satisfied to dismiss the whole troubling episode. Most residents, yet not all. 3 weeks following Hale's breakdown, a bondsman emerged at the Richmond auction facility of Pulliam and Slade. He reached there unaccompanied, entering through the main entrance at mid-morning, his wrists secured by basic rope, no restraints, no guardian, no proof of possession. James Pulliam, the main associate, afterward characterized the instant of his entrance as the strangest occurrence of his 40-year profession in the bondsman trade. The young individual was maybe 23 years old, tall and slender, with complexion that displayed a shade between honey and amber, indicating combined heritage, though not in the typical arrangements. His characteristics held a balance that appeared mathematically unfeasible, elevated cheekbones that captured illumination like artwork, a jaw that could have been created by a skilled artist, eyes of such an uncommon shade, a profound violet blue that seemed almost glowing in particular light, that Pulliam actually moved backward when the young individual gazed straight at him. Yet it wasn't merely the physical attractiveness, though that by itself was remarkable enough to attract notice. It was something different, a characteristic of quietness regarding him, an impression that he remained somehow beyond the regular progression of time and situation. He traveled with an elegance that implied noble upbringing, though his attire was basic workers' clothing, used but neat. He responded when addressed, his tone educated and exact, though he provided no reason for his attendance, no account of where he'd originated or who possessed him. "Who directed you here?" Pulliam insisted, attempting to restore control over this profoundly disturbing circumstance. "I was informed you would understand what to do with me," the young individual answered peacefully. Informed by whom? By the female in gray. Pulliam sensed cold move down his backbone. He'd learned stories from Lexington. Voyagers traveling through Richmond had discussed the unusual episode with Gideon Hale and the disappeared bondsman, the female nobody could properly characterize. And currently this stunning being remained in his auction facility, stating she directed him. "What's your title?" Pulliam questioned, his tone hardly stable. "My title is Josiah." "Do you possess documents?" "Proof of possession, a receipt of sale." Josiah grinned, and the gesture contained such sorrow that Pulliam sensed embarrassment without comprehending why. "No documents, no possession, nothing except what you observe before you. Then you're a fugitive. I ought to deliver you to the officials." "You might do that, yet you won't, since you've already determined my worth, Mr. Pulliam. You've already envisioned the sum I would generate at sale, and you've already concluded that earnings exceed legality." The precision of this evaluation hit Pulliam like a bodily strike. It was precisely what he'd been considering. A bondsman of such remarkable presentation, provided without papers or identifiable possession, signified a chance unlike anything he'd experienced. If he merely registered Josiah into his upcoming sale with created documentation, who would challenge it? Who would look past that appearance and form to question difficult matters about origin and lawfulness? "Where would you even travel if I freed you?" Pulliam questioned, mostly to himself than to Josiah. "A bondsman lacking documents is as good as captured. You'd be seized within a day." "Then it appears we both comprehend the circumstances. You benefit, I obtain meals and housing, and we prevent including officials who might question matters neither of us desire to discuss." And therefore Pulliam created his corrupt agreement. He produced false papers stating Josiah had been transferred to him by a Kentucky agriculturalist, falsified a receipt of sale with an experienced hand, and registered him into the forthcoming sale planned for August 14th. He informed his commercial associate Samuel Slade merely that he'd obtained a remarkable piece of merchandise that would generate unmatched sums. He informed nobody regarding the mysterious conditions of Josiah's entrance, or the profoundly disturbing discussion they'd exchanged. Yet information traveled regardless. Information constantly travels in Richmond when something remarkable emerges. Within days, murmurs moved through the city's upper groups. A bondsman of unachievable attractiveness, a young individual who appeared like something from legend rather than ordinary existence. a singular opportunity for whoever possessed the resources and the determination to acquire him. The Whitmore household learned these murmurs at precisely the incorrect point in their diminishing wealth. Harrison Whitmore had received his father's tobacco estate 5 years previously with ambitious plans of growth and improvement. Rather, he'd managed consistent deterioration, weak harvest results, poor ventures in railroad shares, increasing obligations to Richmond financial institutions. His spouse, Catherine, originated from established Virginia wealth, yet her household's riches was secured in property and standing rather than available funds. The Whitmores preserved appearances through progressively urgent actions, organizing expensive gatherings they couldn't fund, acquiring extravagances on loan, constantly one move before lenders. Harrison's junior sibling, Thomas, observed this deterioration with increasing concern. Thomas possessed none of Harrison's ambitious plans or Catherine's social aspirations. He supervised the estate's regular functions while his sibling performed gentleman agriculturalist in Richmond. He comprehended precisely how near they were to total monetary failure, and he'd been insisting for months that they required to transfer possessions, decrease costs, acknowledge their constraints before catastrophe became unavoidable. Yet Harrison wouldn't pay attention. Harrison trusted in impressions, in the strength of standing to overcome physical existence, and when he learned regarding the remarkable bondsman being provided at Pulliam and Slade, he perceived chance rather than hazard. A bondsman of such extraordinary presentation would be the supreme status indicator, evidence that the Whitmore household still controlled assets, still earned their position among Virginia's upper class. The sum didn't concern him. The expense would be validated by the social benefit he would achieve. Thomas attempted to convince him. They didn't possess $11,000 to invest on a single bondsman. They hardly possessed $11,000 altogether. Yet Harrison rejected these worries. He would locate the funds. He would lend from the financial institutions utilizing the estate as security. He would succeed at the sale and restore the Whitmore title to distinction through pure boldness. Catherine, for her side, maintained her personal motives for backing the acquisition. She'd learned various stories regarding Josiah, murmurs among the females of Richmond community regarding the bondsman's uncommon characteristics. How he appeared to comprehend matters before they were voiced, how his attendance in a chamber altered the environment, caused individuals to admit realities they'd planned to maintain concealed. Catherine possessed mysteries of her personal, mysteries that endangered everything she'd constructed, and she trusted with the supernatural reasoning of urgent individuals that acquiring this remarkable bondsman might somehow shield her from revelation. The additional significant concern originated from the Preston household. Senator Marcus Preston served Virginia in Washington, a role of massive strength and control. His offspring, Daniel, supervised the household's Richmond properties, containing a residence on Grace Street, where the senator remained during his regular visits from the government. Daniel had lately wed a Philadelphia fortune called Elizabeth, introducing greatly required funds into the Preston household accounts, yet the union was difficult. Elizabeth considered Virginia community restricting and primitive. She despised the bondage that encircled her, created no mystery of her freedom, supporting views, and had previously warned to go back to Philadelphia and remove her wealth with her. Daniel, urgent to rescue his union and preserve connection to Elizabeth's funds, believed the attractive bondsman might function as a reconciliation present, something so unique and precious that even Elizabeth's ethical protests might be defeated by the visual attraction. He envisioned offering Josiah as basically a piece of artwork rather than a worker, a domestic decoration that would exhibit the Preston household's sophisticated preference rather than their involvement in human servitude. It was distorted reasoning created from urgency, yet Daniel trusted it completely. As August 14th neared, James Pulliam understood he'd produced something considerably more risky than a basic, expensive sale. The concern in Josiah had assumed an compulsive characteristic. Several rich households had created personal requests, proposals of early acquisition at superior sums, barely hidden warnings regarding what might occur if they didn't succeed at the offering. The circumstances had increased past regular business rivalry into something more sinister, something that seemed like aggression, anticipating a reason to appear. Pulliam attempted to control the circumstances by creating rigid sale guidelines. Each purchaser would be obligated to display evidence of resources before joining. Offering would be performed in a restricted chamber rather than the open platform. Merely genuine purchasers with confirmed assets would be allowed. Yet these safeguards, meant to avoid disorder, would demonstrate completely insufficient for what was approaching. The evening prior to the sale, Josiah asked to address Pulliam confidentially. The sale facility proprietor discovered him in the confinement chamber, positioned on a basic bed, his hands clasped peacefully in his lap. In the lamp illumination, his attractiveness appeared even more apparent, nearly difficult to observe straight. "You understand what's going to occur tomorrow," Josiah stated softly, not a query, a declaration. "I understand there will be considerable offering," Pulliam answered guardedly. "I anticipate to observe a closing sum that will please all groups. That's not what I intend. You understand there will be aggression. You've sensed it developing. Individuals don't invest $11,000 on a bondsman without fury and urgency pushing them. Whatever occurs tomorrow will ruin someone, likely several individuals, and you'll carry accountability for enabling it." Pulliam sensed rage increase in him. "I'm performing legitimate commerce. If rich individuals desire to rival for precious merchandise, that's their concern. I didn't produce the conditions that delivered you here. Didn't you?" Josiah's violet eyes focused on him with disturbing strength. "You selected to continue without investigating where I originated. You selected to falsify papers rather than examine my beginnings. You selected earnings over morality, Mr. Pulliam, and tomorrow you'll observe where that selection guides." "What are you?" Pulliam murmured, expressing the query that had troubled him for weeks. "You're not similar to other bondsmen. You're not similar to anybody I've ever met. What genuinely occurred in Lexington with Gideon Hale? Who is the female in gray?" Josiah grinned, that sorrowful grin once more. "Some queries resolve themselves, Mr. Pulliam. Observe tomorrow. Observe what occurs when individuals attempt to acquire what was never intended to be possessed. You'll comprehend everything then." The discussion left Pulliam profoundly disturbed. He went back to his workplace and invested hours examining the falsified papers he'd produced, looking for some defect that might offer reason to abandon the sale. Yet the documents were flawless. He'd been too talented at his falsification. And more realistically, abandoning currently would anger the rich households who'd previously dedicated to offering. He was confined by his personal avarice into observing this through to whatever ending waited. August 14th reached with crushing warmth and atmosphere so dense it seemed like inhaling liquid. The sale was planned for 2 o'clock. By midday, the Whitmore, Preston, and 3 additional rich households had gathered at Pulliam and Slade, each joined by attorneys and monetary representatives. Each resolved to succeed despite expense. Harrison Whitmore reached with papers displaying he'd secured his complete estate, every field, every structure, every bondsman he presently possessed, all presented as security for a debt that would provide him the available funds to offer without restriction. Thomas had declined to participate, expressing his revulsion with this madness plainly. Yet Catherine joined her spouse, clothed in her best silk, prepared to observe their household's rescue or ruin. Daniel Preston delivered financial papers valued at $15,000, the highest he'd been capable to obtain from Elizabeth's fund, lacking her straight permission. She didn't understand he was present. She didn't understand he was going to invest her legacy on a human individual. He intended to offer Josiah to her as an achieved reality, trusting she would agree once challenged with the existence. The additional purchasers signified different levels of riches and urgency. A cotton broker called Williams, who perceived Josiah as a venture that might be transferred to northern gatherers for even greater sums. A widow called Mrs. Ashford, whose concern appeared to extend past business factors into area that caused even the additional purchasers discomfort, and a silent individual called Graves, who presented no reason for his attendance, yet whose eyes contained a cold determination that implied intentions nobody desired to investigate too thoroughly. At precisely 2 o'clock, Josiah was delivered into the restricted sale chamber, and for 17 complete minutes, nobody talked, nobody stirred. They merely gazed at him with looks varying from wonder to desire to something nearing terror. The existence of his attendants surpassed every account they'd learned. He remained on the elevated stage in basic attire, his hands unrestrained currently, his bearing calm yet noble, and he observed each purchaser sequentially with those violet eyes that appeared to perceive through skin to the urgencies and decays underneath. James Pulliam eventually shattered the quiet, his tone stressed. "Gentlemen, ladies, we'll start offering at $1,000. $5,000, Harrison Whitmore stated instantly, his tone rigid with requirement. $7,000, Daniel Preston responded lacking pause. $9,000, Mrs. Ashford stated, her eyes never departing Josiah's appearance. The offering increased with frightening velocity. $10,000, $11,000, $12,000. The quantities being announced surpassed logical evaluation of worth. This was no further business. This was something different, something sinister and absorbing. $15,000. The silent individual called Graves stated peacefully. Closing proposal. The chamber became quiet. $15,000 for a single bondsman. The quantity was shocking. It surpassed the merged yearly earnings of most Virginia households. For a short instant, it appeared the sale would conclude with Graves as the victor. Yet Harrison Whitmore wasn't finished. His appearance had become crimson, perspiration streaming down his forehead, his hands trembling. He observed Catherine, who signaled nearly invisibly, providing consent for the household's total ruin, and Harrison stated in a tone that appeared like it originated from somewhere past logical reasoning. $20,000. The surprise in the chamber was complete. James Pulliam really breathed sharply. Daniel Preston created a noise like he'd been hit. Even Josiah, who'd preserved flawless control, displayed the slightest hint of what might have been sympathy. Going once, Pulliam stated automatically. Going twice. Sold, Graves stated softly from the rear of the chamber, yet not to Mr. Whitmore. Sold to demise and suffering and outcomes none of you are equipped to confront. What are you discussing? Pulliam insisted. You're not the greatest purchaser. I'm not offering at all, Mr. Pulliam. I'm merely watching, and what I watch is that this young individual was right. Observe what occurs when individuals attempt to acquire what was never intended to be possessed. The teaching is going to start. And with that mysterious declaration, Graves departed from the sale chamber, abandoning a collection of individuals who'd merely observed something that created no logic. A purchaser who'd offered $15,000 merely to depart when defeated. A stranger who'd talked like he understood mysteries regarding Josiah that nobody else comprehended. An environment of incorrectness so dense it was nearly apparent. Yet the sale was finished. Harrison Whitmore had succeeded with his crazy offer of $20,000. The documentation was endorsed with trembling hands. The funds moved through financial papers that would require weeks to completely process, yet were approved on the Whitmore household's title and security, and Josiah turned, at minimum on documentation, the lawful possession of an individual who merely ruined himself to acquire him. What Harrison Whitmore didn't understand, what none of them understood still, was that the sale was not the conclusion of this account. It was hardly the start, and the awful education Graves had referenced was going to begin in methods that would trouble Richmond for generations. Harrison Whitmore delivered Josiah to the household property that identical night, traveling in a shut carriage, as if moving something too valuable or too risky to reveal to open observation. The estate residence remained 7 miles beyond Richmond, a columned house that had signified Whitmore's success for 3 periods. Currently, it signified obligation so huge that $20,000 included to current debts, intended the household owed beyond the complete possession, was valued. Thomas was standing on the front entrance when they reached. He'd learned regarding the sale outcomes from a courier who'd traveled forward. His appearance contained and look past rage, past revulsion, something nearer to sorrow. "You ruined us," Thomas stated plainly as Harrison assisted Josiah down from the carriage. "For an attractive appearance, you exchanged away 3 periods of household tradition. I trust you're pleased." "You'll comprehend when you observe him correctly," Harrison answered, his tone holding a frantic quality. "When community observes what we've obtained, when they understand the Whitmores can still control assets that others can merely imagine. Community will understand we're insolvent crazy people." Thomas stopped. "That's what they'll understand. We can't create the debt installments, Harrison. Even with ideal harvest results, we couldn't manage the obligation you merely acquired. You've sentenced us to seizure." Catherine moved between them, her look guardedly arranged. "What's finished is finished. Disagreeing regarding it won't alter anything. We'll adjust. We'll discover a method ahead." Yet as she talked, her eyes maintained moving to Josiah, who remained silently watching this household conflict with that disturbing peace, and for merely an instant, Catherine sensed something change within her torso, a feeling like frozen liquid extending through her blood vessels. A conviction that delivering this attractive being into their residence had welcomed something considerably more terrible than monetary destruction. Josiah was provided a chamber in the primary residence, not in the bondsman sections. Harrison demanded on it, stating he desired his venture near and protected. Yet the choice produced instant stress among the property's additional bondsmen. Who was this stranger that he deserved handling kept for household? What caused him so unique that regular guidelines didn't relate? The lead residence bondsman and senior female called Ruth, who'd worked the Whitmores for 40 years, challenged Thomas regarding it that evening. "That youth ain't regular," she stated directly. "I observed him for merely a moment when they delivered him in, and I'm informing you, Mr. Thomas, there's something incorrect regarding him. The method he observes individuals, like he can perceive straight through to your spirit and discover every wrongdoing you've attempted to conceal. He's merely a bondsman, Ruth. A costly one, yet still merely merchandise. No, sir, he ain't merely anything. You remember my statements. That youth is going to deliver demise to this residence. I sense it in my skeleton. Demise and disclosure and decision." Thomas desired to reject Ruth's worries as belief. Yet he'd sensed it also when he observed Josiah, that impression of incorrectness of something functioning based on guidelines that possessed nothing to perform with the regular arrangement of matters. He'd invested his complete existence on this estate, had been brought up among bondsmen, had supervised human merchandise as informally as supervising animals. Yet Josiah caused him profoundly troubled in methods he couldn't express. That initial evening, unusual matters started occurring. Minor matters at initial, a reflection in the corridor that split from edge to edge despite no effect or heat alteration. 3 timepieces in various chambers that all ceased at the identical instant, 3:17 in the morning. A picture of Harrison's parent that dropped from its placement and arrived face down, the material ripped as if by talons, though no creature had been close to it, Harrison rejected these episodes as chance. Ancient residences adjusted, items dropped, timepieces ceased. Nothing regarding it deserved worry, yet Catherine understood superior. She'd developed up in a Virginia household that still recalled ancient accounts, stories of suggestions and magic, and matters that moved using human forms, yet holding intentions that possessed nothing to perform with human worries. She attempted to talk with Josiah the following dawn, discovering him in the yard, where he'd been provided consent to stroll. He remained among the flowers, contacting their blossoms with extended fingers, his look thoughtful. "Who are you genuinely?" Catherine questioned, lacking introduction. "And don't inform me you're merely a bondsman. I've observed bondsmen my complete existence. You're something different." Josiah rotated to her with those violet eyes, and Catherine sensed her breathing stop. "What do you desire me to be, Mrs. Whitmore? A casualty you can sympathize, a belonging you can exhibit, a decision you can dread. I desire the reality. The reality is, you previously understand. You've understood since the instant you consented to allow Harrison acquire me. You comprehended this would conclude poorly, yet you allowed it occur regardless, since you believed perhaps, merely perhaps, my attendance would divert from your personal mysteries. That individuals would be so concentrated on the enigmatic, attractive bondsman that they wouldn't observe what you've been concealing." Catherine's appearance became white. "What are you discussing?" "The correspondence, Mrs. Whitmore. The ones you've been destroying in your chamber fireplace. The communication with a particular gentleman in Charleston. Your spouse believes you destroy ancient bills and pointless documents. He doesn't understand you've been performing a relationship for the previous 2 years, a relationship that's created outcomes you're urgently attempting to hide." Catherine moved backward as if hit. "How might you maybe? I understand numerous matters. That's my intention. Not to be possessed, yet to disclose, to deliver concealed realities into illumination. Your spouse ruined himself economically to acquire me. Yet what he really obtained was revelation for himself, for you, for all in this residence who's been existing behind guardedly preserved deceptions. You're stating you're here to ruin us intentionally. I'm stating I'm here since your household required ruining. You've constructed everything on bases of robbery and aggression and deceptions. The confined individuals who labor this estate, do you understand how they were obtained? Your spouse's parent purchased most of them from a merchant who focused in abducting free black individuals from northern towns. 27 of the 30. 2 bondsmen on this possession were created free, taken from their households, incorrectly recorded, transferred into servitude that possesses no lawful validity. That's not achievable. My parent, in law, was an honorable individual. Honor and atrocity aren't exclusively separate, Mrs. Whitmore. Numerous of history's largest wrongdoings have been performed by honorable individuals who persuaded themselves their behaviors were validated. Your household's honor is constructed on remains, and currently those remains are going to talk." Catherine escaped from the yard, her heart pounding. She discovered Harrison in his office previously consuming, though it was hardly midday. She attempted to inform him what Josiah had stated, yet her spouse rejected it as the bondsman attempting to influence her feelings. "He's merchandise, Catherine. Merchandise doesn't create warnings or forecasts. It functions, and he'll function us attractively once community observes what we've obtained." Yet community was previously observing. Information of the $20,000 acquisition had traveled through Richmond like flame through dried vegetation, and the response was not respect, yet shock and ridicule. Drawings emerged in publications displaying Harrison as a simpleton. Articles challenged his judgment. Commercial partners who'd once sought Whitmore approval currently prevented the household completely. The purchase that was intended to restore their standing was ruining it considerably more successfully than insolvency by itself might have accomplished. 3 days following Josiah's entrance, the initial demise happened. One of the field bondsmen, a young individual called Isaac, was discovered in his shelter with his neck slashed. The injury was neat and profound, implying a keen edge and somebody who understood what they were performing. Yet Isaac's shelter entrance had been fastened from the interior. The openings were too tiny for anybody to access, and no tool was discovered anywhere close to the remains. The neighborhood officer examined carelessly. The demise of a bondsman seldom deserved genuine notice. He decided it's self-harm, despite the unfeasibility of somebody slashing their personal neck so profoundly and then causing the blade disappear. The additional bondsmen understood superior. They murmured that Isaac had been discussing regarding Josiah, had been stating matters regarding the attractive stranger that implied he understood something risky. Currently, Isaac was deceased and the communication was obvious. Some mysteries insisted quiet. Thomas attempted to persuade Harrison to transfer Josiah instantly, reduce their damages, agree to whatever sum they might obtain, and eliminate this doomed attendance from their residence.